The coronavirus pandemic and the subsequent lockdown have proven a tough scenario to negotiate for local government. They're responsible, of course, for ensuring access to water and sanitation on emergency footing in the initial phases of this lockdown, dealing with permits for informal traders and directing funding to cover the municipal response to the pandemic. We're now joined by Xolile George, CEO of the South African Local Government Association. So, George, good evening, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Around April or so, when you're presenting to Parliament, you said the COVID-19 pandemic is a perfect storm for municipalities. What did you mean?
Good evening to all Newzroom Afrika viewers. And indeed, we have engaged with Parliament on the challenges that we all face and that arises out of COVID-19. And as we all know as South Africans, that local government is the core face of engagement with society. That's where me and you stay. And that's where me and you expect to receive services in the form of electricity, water, functioning traffic systems, and so on. So when we say it is a perfect storm, it is in relation to what we know would be the attendant challenges that would be exposing the structural weaknesses that exist in local government, both at the level of funding, at the level of capacity to execute the task, as well as the growing number of people who would be offloaded, very painful experience where people would lose jobs, as we have seen reported widely now. All of those people who were working would now find place at home as unemployed. And what the policy requires of us as local government, as part of a caring government, is to ensure that when a person is unemployed, that person automatically falls in the category of an indigent person. So when you have a growing list of indigents at municipalities, it adds to an already constrained fiscal environment at municipalities where they have lack of revenue in the first place. So when you have a growing burden added into that, it also increases the file of municipalities having to cross-subsidize quite a number of those communities, because we can't switch them off for water, you can't switch them off for electricity, precisely for their indigent status. So when we say it's a perfect storm, it's precisely arising out of those attendant realities that there will be an extra responsibility expected to local government to shoulder the difficult challenges that our nations face.
Now, you predicted a 5% drop in rate payment, and depending on how long the lockdown would last, it's estimating losses of close to 15 billion rands. What's the real picture?
The real picture is that if you look at our metropolitan municipalities, we have 8 in the country, and all 8 have given us reports that shows that on average, they will be experiencing a drop on revenue collections ranging in anything between 10 to 30%. Now, that's a significant knock, because as local government, we are expected in terms of our fiscal policy framework to raise own revenue. So when we are unable to raise that revenue, it immediately visits the municipality with a fiscal gap to be able to provide service on a sustainable basis and also ensure uninterrupted. As you would know, we buy electricity from Eskom. We buy electricity, water from water boards. So if you're unable to meet your bulk creditors because you are unable to collect, it adds into what I described as a perfect storm, because the cycle becomes vicious.
Well, you got 20 billion rands from the Solidarity Fund to address those issues, particularly issues of water provision. Did that assist?
To a limited extent, yes. It is quite minuscule, and given the reality that municipalities face, because many of our municipalities have no source of revenue at all. We have more than 111 municipalities that, in the absence of the national fiscus transferring grants into that municipal operation, it will almost be non-existent. So when you have 20 billion rand against 257 municipalities, you could do a most arithmetic calculation. You'll find that on average, it will go to far less. So what we have said as SALGA in welcoming the 20 billion rand, it is quite insignificant, but we equally understand the strain that is visited on our national fiscus. So we've got to receive the little that can be injected. And we're very grateful that the president has allocated this amount. So we will be directing it towards payment of bulk purchases in terms of water and electricity to make sure that we provide constant supply to communities, but also deal with the reality that we face as local government, that every rand we have, whether it's 20 billion or 200 billion rand, we have areas of maladministration. We also have areas of inefficiencies in the system. So if we start prioritizing those areas, every rand will then count and count optimally. And we are increasingly saying as SALGA to municipalities, we must make sure that when there's instances of maladministration and there's lack of accountability, do not expect us to push the national fiscus to transfer money to municipalities if you are unable to account. At the same time, we expect consequences whenever there's instances of wrongdoing, and we are extracting that accountability from those who are in charge of those municipalities.